They mocked Big Shaq's mother, bullied her like she was nobody, forgetting that silence is where real power sharpens. But the woman they tried to break was already the new boss. She didn't come to fit in, she came to rewrite the system. And now, Vantage Corp answers to the legacy they never saw coming. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Atlanta's skyline gleamed under a cloudless sky, glass towers standing tall like polished trophies of ambition. Among them was the silver and charcoal monument of Vantage Corp, a leading marketing powerhouse dressed in clean design, digital screens that blink trends, and lobby floors so immaculate you could see your insecurities reflected back at you. It was Monday morning, and inside the building, the rhythm of clicking heels, buzzing phones, and controlled caffeine-fueled urgency created a subtle hum, the sound of a corporate battlefield, wrapped in designer suits. Lucille O'Neal stepped through the sliding doors at 8:01 a.m., her heels clicking at a modest, steady pace, handbag tucked at her elbow, face calm but unreadable. She wore a simple gray suit, her silver-streaked hair coiled tightly at the back of her head, her ID badge already clipped to her chest like armor. A few heads turned, not with awe, with confusion. In this place, youth didn't just speak louder, it ruled the room. The average employee looked like they'd just walked off an Instagram ad campaign. And here came Lucille, a woman who had known struggle, grief, love, and the relentless stretch of time, stepping into an arena that saw age as irrelevance and grace as weakness. Her job title was entry-level admin coordinator. Simple, clean, forgettable. Exactly what she'd asked for. As she approached the elevator bank, a trio of assistants glanced her way, lowering their iced coffees just long enough to whisper behind slim MacBooks. "She looks like she's someone's grandma," one said under her breath, not nearly quiet enough. The others snorted, quick to adjust their masks of professionalism when Lucille walked past. She heard them, of course. Lucille heard everything. No reaction. Not yet. Her first week passed like slow oil slipping through fingers. She was given redundant tasks, printing out weekly analytics reports no one read, highlighting campaign feedback that had already been digitized, taking coffee orders for managers who'd forget to thank her. Every morning she arrived early. Every night she stayed past the exodus of the 5 p.m. crowd. She kept to herself, quiet as wind through pine trees, but they kept watching her. The ones in the glass conference rooms glanced with amusement whenever she walked by. Those rooms always filled with laughter that paused when she entered to deliver a schedule, only to resume with twice the volume once she left. Passive smiles, tight chuckles, looks that were too polite to be genuine. They whispered about how she dressed too modestly, how she asked too many questions about old systems, how her hands moved too slow on a keyboard. "She's not exactly the Vantage vibe," one young intern remarked during a lunch break in the lounge. Her name was Delaney Rowe, all sharp cheekbones and sharp intentions. "She's like vintage HR, not strategic." Chandler Knox, the VP of brand, overheard and smiled. "Don't say that." He chuckled. "It's ageist. She's probably great at Excel." Then he grinned into his sparkling water, adjusting his watch and making no effort to hide the smugness lacing his tone. Delaney laughed too hard, the kind of laugh people use when they're trying to climb something invisible. What none of them noticed, or perhaps refused to, was how Lucille watched just as much as they did. Her eyes absorbed the tone behind every sentence, the curl of every lip, the spaces between people where politics festered. She wasn't offended by the whispers. She was cataloging them. She noted how Chandler always addressed women with a wink or a lowered voice. She tracked how Harper Dane from HR had mastered the art of gaslighting, using company policy like a velvet noose. Lucille saw interns pitted against one another for petty credit, assistants sobbing quietly in the bathroom after feedback sessions, and managers replacing genuine ideas with showmanship that pleased only the algorithm. Vantage Corp wasn't evil. It was slick, sharpened to appear progressive on the surface while its core still carried rot. The kind that hides behind statements like diversity is our strength, and yet never promotes anyone who isn't already part of the inner circle. Week 2 arrived, and Lucille's inbox began to fill with tasks designed to keep her out of sight. She was told to archive files that had already been digitally stored. One afternoon, she was assigned to sort the janitorial supply receipts, just in case finance asked. They didn't. The implication wasn't subtle. She was being put in her place. Still, she complied, never resisting, never snapping, never breaking rhythm. And still, they whispered, Is she like a volunteer? Maybe she lost her retirement. Or something. My mom would never even apply here. Like, why would she? Maybe she's lonely. What no one knew, what no one cared to ask, was why a woman like Shaquille O'Neal, mother of one of America's most beloved sports icons, was filing paper trails in the back of a corporate office instead of basking in a quiet life funded by success. But Lucille had a reason, one rooted in something deeper than boredom or pride. Her eyes scanned every interaction not just for survival, but for truth. There was a quiet rhythm to it. A method. She made notes, not just mental ones. A small notebook lived in her tote, tucked behind her reading glasses, and hand lotion. She titled the pages with simple words: tone, bias, power, pressure, silence. And beneath each header she listed what she observed: who spoke over whom, who got credit, who laughed too loudly when a joke was made at someone else's expense. She knew these patterns. She'd seen them before, not just here, but through her years watching Shaquille rise through systems built to profit from black bodies, but rarely protect black hearts. She knew how often people mistook silence for submission and professionalism for passivity. And she also knew something none of them knew. Vantage Corp was under review. A silent acquisition was underway, driven by a private equity collaboration, led in part by the Shaquille O'Neal Foundation, under a neutral LLC name to avoid early leaks. Lucille had volunteered to enter the company in disguise, not out of necessity, but principle. She wanted to see it from the ground up, not just what the books showed, but what the people revealed when they thought no one important was watching. And they all assumed she wasn't important. At the end of her second week, a department-wide email invited all staff to an innovation lunch and learn, a casual presentation of next quarter's brand trends. Everyone was told to bring an idea. Lucille brought none. She sat in the back, unnoticed, until a junior designer named Troy, earnest and nervous, presented a campaign idea about redefining authenticity. The concept was clever: real people, real voices, a contrast to AI-driven copycat branding. When Troy finished, Chandler smiled and leaned forward. Solid. But it's kind of rough? Like we've seen that raw feel a lot. Let's smooth it out. Glossier vibes. You know? Troy hesitated. But the point was Chandler cut him off, still smiling. We get it. Good effort. Troy sank back, nodding. Lucille's fingers twitched, her pen tapping once. She wrote, voice. Killed gently. Idea defanged by hierarchy. Eye contact, 0. After the meeting, she passed Troy by the coffee machine. She didn't say much, just placed a small post-it on the counter. It was brilliant. Don't water it down. You have a voice. Use it. No signature. He turned, stunned. But she was already walking away. Upstairs in a glass room, Harper Dane glanced at a chart, showing anonymous HR reports, none in the last 2 quarters. She smiled to herself. That's what you get with clean culture, she muttered. But clean wasn't the word. It was polished, sanitized, sterile. Lucille's phone buzzed in her pocket, a message from a private number.
Progress?
She typed back without hesitation. They're exactly who we thought they were. That night, as the office emptied and lights dimmed floor by floor, Lucille stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked down at the street. The city kept moving, unaware of the quiet war playing out above. Behind her, the company buzzed with fake praise, toothless compliments, and carefully filtered meetings. They didn't know who they were laughing at, but they would, very soon. He ended the call with a quiet request. If you find anything unusual, call me first. As he hung up, his phone buzzed. A message from his mother. Hey baby. Just wanted to say I'm proud of the work you're doing. I'm good. Just busy. We'll talk soon. I love you. He stared at the message for a long moment. There was love in it. But something else too. A layer of careful omission. She was hiding something. Not out of shame, but out of resolve. Shaq exhaled and leaned back in his chair. His mother had always told him to let the world think you're quiet until you decide to speak. Whatever she was doing, she wasn't finished yet. And when she did speak, he knew it would echo. By her 3rd week at Vantage Corp, Lucille O'Neal had become an invisible fixture in the office, seen but never truly acknowledged. She showed up on time, never late, dressed with dignity but without flash, offering polite greetings that were often returned with tight-lipped nods or distracted glances. The halls of this office didn't echo with cruelty in the traditional sense. The harm here was polished, woven into company culture like a flaw hidden in expensive silk. It was professional antagonism, the kind that wore a smile and kept its hands clean. Each day, Lucille climbed the stairs to the third floor, not because the elevators didn't work, but because she'd learned early on that people in elevators rarely talked, and the ones who didn't talk to her. She preferred to walk. It gave her time to breathe, to prepare, and more importantly, to listen, because it was in those quiet passing conversations, the ones whispered between departments or shared during bathroom breaks, where the real company politics bled through. The office was run less by titles, and more by personalities, and none were louder, or more dangerously refined, than Harper Dane. Harper was the kind of HR executive who knew how to smile while pressing a scalpel to your career. Always in minimalist fashion, sharp-lined blazers, in neutral tones, heels clicking like precision tools, Harper spoke in a tone that could soothe a room while cutting down an employee's confidence, with corporate poetry. She didn't raise her voice. She adjusted her tone. She didn't reject ideas. She redirected priorities. She didn't fire people, she made them quit with exhaustion and a sense of failure so subtle, they often believed it was their idea. From the first day, Harper had watched Lucille with the air of someone observing a guest who overstayed their welcome. When Lucille asked for a login to the internal learning portal, Harper blinked and replied, "Oh, I wasn't sure you'd be using the digital modules. They're advanced, but I'll see what I can do." Lucille had smiled, not kindly, not mockingly, just knowingly. She never asked again. Then there was Chandler Knox, the firm's vice president of brand experience, a man whose suits cost more than most interns' monthly rent, and whose charm worked like an invisible leash on everyone who didn't look like Lucille. Chandler was the walking embodiment of performative diversity, the type who posted allyship quotes during Black History Month, but had never promoted a black employee to lead a major campaign. He loved buzzwords like inclusive culture and authenticity, but in meeting he consistently interrupted female staff, especially older ones, with fake compliments like "love your insight," reminds me of the classics, before steering the conversation towards someone younger, whiter, and louder. Lucille's first direct assignment from him came via email, carbon copied to 4 other people, and written in the tone of someone delegating to a digital assistant. "Lucille, organize physical archives for Q2 reviews. There are a few dozen boxes in the storage annex. Start this week. Low priority, but thoroughness matters. We need every invoice, contract, and post-campaign asset. Chandler." No greeting, no context, no thanks. She completed it in 2 days. He never followed up. The third antagonist was the office's self-proclaimed innovation queen, Delaney Rowe, a mid-level manager who'd risen fast through social capital and a curated online persona that merged marketing strategy with influencer theatrics. Delaney treated the workplace like a live set, every hallway encounter a scene, every meeting an audition for a future panel invite. She was quick to toss out acronyms, slower to accept criticism, and allergic to humility. Her feedback to Lucille often sounded like this: "I respect experience so much, like, truly. But sometimes we have to rewire old instincts to match digital agility. That's the future. You get that, right?" Lucille would nod, not in agreement, but in permission. Let them talk. Let them show themselves. With each passing day, the trio made their intentions clearer. Keep Lucille boxed in, not by physical limits, but by eroding her presence. She was given tasks designed to feel important, but offered no visibility. She was assigned to cross-departmental workflows with zero authority. When meetings were held, her name was often left off the invite list, or she was asked to take notes, a subtle reminder of where they believed she belonged. But Lucille didn't flinch, not because she didn't feel the sting, but because she understood something most of them never would. Power isn't proven in reaction. It's revealed in restraint. So, she began documenting. Quietly, precisely. At night, her small notebook filled with entries labeled by date and coded by behavior. She didn't just write what was said, she wrote how it was said, who was in the room, who looked away, and who smiled through discomfort. She tracked trends. Harper used indirect dismissals before lunch. Chandler delivered his passive jabs during large meetings. Delaney chose to undercut in the guise of mentorship. Lucille logged it all. She titled one page "Patterns of Polished Prejudice," another, "Empathy as Optics." Each week she printed out department rosters and mapped them against promotion announcements. She noticed how support staff of color rarely made it into creative meetings, how exit interviews for older employees disappeared without traceable feedback. She took screenshots, archived Slack messages, saved emails where Chandler congratulated a junior male associate for a campaign Lucille had prepped in background silence. The more they tried to shrink her, the more she expanded her lens. She noticed allies too. The quiet ones. The designer who held the door when no one else did. The copywriter who slid her a thank you post-it after she organized a resource list. The accountant who whispered, "Hang in there," during a staff event when Delaney mocked her for misunderstanding an app integration. These weren't loud gestures, but they were real. One late afternoon, Harper walked past Lucille's desk and paused. She tilted her head, eyeing the neatly organized stack of campaign briefs Lucille had just filed. Her smile was slight, surgical. "You're very thorough," she said. Lucille looked up, meeting her gaze. "I've had practice." Harper's eyes flicked the notes on Lucille's desk. "Just make sure you're not overextending. We don't want burnout." The irony was thick enough to taste. "I'll let you know when I'm close," Lucille replied evenly. That night, Harper made a note in her own files. "Lucille O'Neal, monitor for boundary issues, may not be a long-term fit." Meanwhile, Lucille made a different note. "Dane, Hing, classic gaslight tactic. Watch for next move when challenged." By the end of the fourth week, Vantage Corp had no idea was being dissected from within. They believed they were grinding Lucille down, when in truth she was drilling deeper, gathering data, decoding behavior, building something larger than any one person in that building. She wasn't documenting pain. She was collecting proof. Every smug smirk, every casual dismissal, every joke masked in culture fit rhetoric, she banked them like receipts. Because Lucille knew there would come a day when the lights would shift, and the ones who laughed at her presence would be forced to stand in it. She didn't need vengeance. She needed clarity. And the wolves, sharp-dressed, sweet-voiced, smugly sure, had no idea that the woman they dismissed as harmless was already writing the first chapter of their exposure. Lucille wasn't just watching. She was preparing. By the time he got home, the sky was deep and heavy, and the house was too quiet. He walked into the den, pulled open a drawer, and found an old photo of Lucille sitting in her church hat, arms folded, a slight smirk on her face, the one she gave when she knew something nobody else did. He stared at it, then at his phone. Still no text from her. He typed, then deleted. Typed again. "Hey ma, thinking about you. Just checking in. No rush. Love you." He put the phone down and stepped outside, where the wind carried a chill that made him remember a line she used to tell him when he was a teen, angry at being underestimated by coaches and scouts who said he was too big to move well. "Let the world think you're slow," she'd say. "Let them think you're soft. Let 'em all underestimate. But when it's time to roar, don't hold back." He'd lived by that. And now, something told him, she was doing the same. The next morning, he got a call from his legal team. "You might want to come in," his advisor said. "There are changes happening at Vantage Corp. Quiet hires, unusual shifts in staffing structure. Someone's been embedded, someone without a traceable employment history in our database. We think it's intentional." Shaq didn't respond right away. His heart beat louder than his thoughts. He knew. He didn't have proof. Not yet. But he knew. Lucille. She was in it. Somewhere inside that machine. And if she hadn't told him, it wasn't because she didn't trust him. It was because she needed to see something on her own. She was working a plan. She was doing what she had always done, carrying burdens so her son didn't have to. But this time, he wouldn't stand back. He wouldn't interfere, not directly. But he'd keep the lights on. He'd keep the road clear. And if anyone tried to block her, even subtly, they wouldn't know where the hit came from. Shaq leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the names highlighted in the report. Harper Dane, Chandler Knox, Delaney Rowe. A familiar trio of puppeteers dancing under the illusion of progressiveness. He didn't know their faces yet, but he would. Storms were coming, not the kind that tear buildings down, the kind that reveal what's been leaking inside them for years. Lucille was the rain, and he would be the thunder, just close enough to be heard, but far enough to let her light strike first. The office lights buzzed faintly overhead, as Lucille sat in the far right cubicle, her desk tucked behind a row of decorative succulents, and a forgotten filing cabinet. To most, she was an afterthought. Someone who had been around too long. Always quiet, always polite. They remembered her when something needed organizing, when no one else volunteered, when a committee lacked diversity. But Lucille was always watching. On her work laptop, beneath folders labeled Q4 reports and policy drafts, was a discreetly buried folder titled January Wolves. Its name sounded poetic, even innocent, but it was anything but. Lucille had curated it for over 2 years, a digital vault of microaggressions, dismissals, stolen credit, polite exclusions, and thinly veiled discrimination. She clicked it open like a surgeon lifting the lid of a cold tray. Each file was a case, dates, names, quotes, observations, categorized with relentless precision. Feb 3, Marketing Brainstorm. Maybe you can handle the notes, Lucille. You're always so organized. Not asked. Assigned. March 12, Weekly Status Meeting. Manager rewords my idea from last week. Team applauds. No one remembers I said it first. Upper 7, HR coffee chat. You're lucky. Most people your age don't stay sharp. Smiled when she said it. Meant it as a compliment. These weren't random. They formed a structure, a pattern so pervasive, it looked like policy. Lucille, at 58, had learned to mask fury with grace. She wasn't angry in the way they imagined older women could be. Bitter, bristling, she was meticulous, calculating and absolutely clear about what she was witnessing. During the day, Lucille played her role with elegance. A nod here, a thank you email there. She laughed when expected, left meetings before they turned into after-hours drinks she had no desire to attend. She knew how to blend in, how to stay just close enough to be included, but never close enough to be trusted with authority. And every time someone crossed a line, smiling, subtle slicing, she wrote it down. At night, the memories came back in sharp waves, flashbacks like knife-edge film cuts, returned without warning. Lucille, 26, in a publishing office, being asked if she was one of the interns from the temp agency. Lucille, 33, passed over for promotion again, told the team just needed fresh energy. Lucille, 47, after catching a junior colleague mimicking her behind her back, only to later need her help on a policy draft. Each one logged. Each one feeding the file that now had over 300 entries. She wasn't alone, and she knew it. That was the difference. The file had grown to include stories she heard from others. Colleagues, former interns, even custodial staff who had quietly confided in her. May 2, admin hallway. Janitor shares story of supervisor calling her too moody for requesting leave during Ramadan. No report filed. Didn't want to lose hours. The stories crossed race, gender, and age, different faces, same system. And Lucille had become the silent architect of their collection. Then came the email that changed everything. Subject: upcoming leadership changes. Internal announcement. Lucille read it twice, then again. The name at the top of the new appointments: Dr. Lucille Mensah, Interim Division Director. She closed her eyes. It was earlier than she had planned, but it wasn't a mistake. The board, led by a newly hired chair from New York, had reviewed her independent project outcomes, her designs for inclusive hiring frameworks, the quietly efficient restructuring plans she'd been feeding into systems, without asking for credit. They'd noticed, and just like that, she was no longer background. But Lucille didn't celebrate. She knew better. The wolves wouldn't scatter. They would simply shift their teeth behind softer smiles. By Monday, the tone had changed. The same colleagues who'd once spoken over her now lingered in hallways, eager to compliment her scarf or ask about her thoughts on synergizing interdepartmental flow. Lucille nodded, took mental notes and kept her replies brief. She didn't announce the file. Not yet. But she expanded it. June 5, post-promotion. Sarah asks if I feel pressured to represent all Black women now. Later jokes I'm the diversity jackpot. June 9, executive team meeting. CFO mispronounces my name 3 times. Doesn't correct himself. Later asks me to mentor young women of color. We need your magic. She made no public correction, no HR report, just additions, observations, and one quiet decision. She would change the way the game was played. Lucille began restructuring weekly meetings. No more speaking over others. She made participants rotate leadership roles. Submissions were now blind reviewed. She quietly implemented a feedback tracker to identify patterns in employee treatment. Not punitive, just revealing. And patterns revealed plenty. One afternoon she called a private meeting with Amira, a young analyst who had once whispered, "They don't see me. I talk, and I vanish." Lucille handed her a folder, not the real one, but a carefully curated sample from January Wolves. Redacted names, just facts. Amira flipped through it, her eyes widening. "I thought it was just me." Lucille looked her in the eye. "They always want us to think that." Amira became the first co-keeper of the file. Then came Jerome. Then Priya. The document morphed into a silent coalition, not for revenge, but accountability. One afternoon, a well-liked department manager, Alan, made a joke in front of 3 junior staff members. "I'm sure Lucille's got another one of her secret audits cooking." The room laughed. Lucille, who stood in the doorway unnoticed, didn't smile. She just walked in. "You'll be happy to know I don't audit in secret anymore." The room fell quiet. She moved past them, placed a report on the table, and addressed the junior staff. "This contains a full proposal for rotating equity leads in each department. If you want in, let me know." She left the room without looking back. Behind her, the air felt different. That night, she added a new entry. July 1, shift in tone. "They've realized I'm not temporary. No more patronizing. Now it's caution. Some are adapting. Others, still hiding their teeth." Folder status, Phase 2. Initiated. Months passed. Lucille didn't need to raise her voice. She redesigned protocols, created safe reporting channels, and brought forward long-buried grievances, framed not as complaints, but as patterns. She introduced a new training series, titled Recognizing the Unseen Case Studies, dramatized scenarios based on real entries from January Wolves. Again, names withheld, but stories exact. Each session began with a single slide. "What you don't see shapes everything you do." Attendance was mandatory. The impact was slow but seismic. Lucille wasn't interested in making headlines. She was interested in changing currents, and quietly she did. Eventually HR caught on. The original director, who had once asked Lucille if she planned to retire gracefully soon, stepped down to pursue personal projects. Her replacement was someone Lucille had mentored years ago, a quiet but sharp former intern who had once been written off as too reserved for leadership. Now her nameplate read Deputy Director of Organizational Integrity. Lucille smiled at that. The wolves still existed. Systems don't vanish in a fiscal quarter. But now they moved warily. They paused before dismissing. They thought twice before excluding. Because now they didn't know which meeting was being documented, which interaction might appear, anonymized, on the next case study slide. They didn't know which one of their offhand jokes might be dissected as an example of layered bias. Lucille had turned observation into strategy, experience into ammunition, silence into structure. On her final night as interim director, before her permanent appointment was to be announced, she sat again at her desk. The folder blinked open one last time. She scrolled through the logs, the charts, the voice notes, each one a brick in the quiet revolution she'd built. She didn't delete it. She simply renamed it January Wolves, Archive 1. Then she created a new folder, February Suns. Inside it, a single file, Feb 1, new chapter. A culture doesn't change because you scare people. It changes when the silence starts speaking. Lucille logged off. The wolves hadn't seen her coming. They'd forgotten what happens when the quiet one keeps the records. First lesson: fear is temporary. Integrity is scalable. Lucille leaned back. She had not just survived the system. She had inherited it. Now it was hers to redesign. Across from her, Harper Alden, Director of Operations, flipped through printed copies of the updated compliance memo. His lips twisted with mock concern. "And you approved this?" he asked, waving the stapled packet like it was tainted. Lucille didn't answer right away. She glanced at the corner of the room, where Chandler Young, sharp-tongued, freshly promoted from strategy, leaned against the wall with folded arms, and that same smug, knowing smirk he always wore when the spotlight wasn't on him. But he knew it would be soon. "I drafted it based on the updated equity recommendations," Lucille said calmly, her voice even. "It was reviewed by legal." Harper scoffed and tossed the document on the table. It landed with a loud slap. "Legal says the rollout language wasn't aligned with the board's tone. We're now fielding complaints from 4 departments that feel blindsided. How do you expect us to defend a communication that reads like an indictment?" Lucille looked him in the eye. Because it was one. That silenced the room. For 3 seconds. Then Chandler stepped forward. "This isn't about your mission, Lucille. It's about impact. There's a process. You've been emotionally reactive. That's not leadership. The word emotional landed like a slap, wrapped in silk. It was the same word people had used her entire career to neuter her insight, to drain her of authority without ever raising their voices. She knew the game, but this time, it stung deeper. Because they knew who she was now. They knew she wasn't some temp shuffled into policy work. She was the chairwoman. Their chairwoman. And still, they'd found a way to talk down to her in front of a room full of associates who pretended not to watch. Lucille closed her notebook, stood up and looked around at the team. No one spoke. Not a whisper. Just darting eyes and that same stiff corporate posture. She nodded once, then walked out. Calm, controlled. But inside her something cracked. Not from the attack, but from the realization. They still didn't see her. Or worse, they did. And it didn't matter. In the elevator, she faced the closed doors, blinking fast. She refused to let the tears fall here, in this sterile box of glass and steel and silence. She needed air. Back in her office, she locked the door, lowered the blinds, and let herself crumble for a moment. Not loud, not messy, just quiet shaking shoulders, and 2 tears she didn't wipe right away. On her laptop, she opened a blank document and typed the subject line, "Resignation effective immediately." She stared at it. The cursor blinked. A dare. She wrote 4 lines. "I believed I could outlast the patterns. I thought title would mean transformation. I was wrong. I'm done." Her finger hovered over the save icon. Then she stopped. Something in her shifted. A kind of clarity, born not from hope, but defiant. She deleted the message. Then she opened a new document. "To those who forgot I could lead." The title came easy. The words followed. Not rushed. Not edited. Just truth, raw and deliberate. She didn't write it for reach air. She didn't write it for revenge. She wrote it because silence had never protected her. And now she was tired of protecting the system that made her silent. "You forgot that I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I was studying. Every laugh you shared at my expense. Every time I was called too sensitive, too old school, too intense. Every meeting where my suggestions were recited back to me by someone younger, louder, paler, and called innovation. I watched. I learned. I endured. Not because I lacked power, but because I wanted to see how you used yours. I wanted to know who believed they were safe in their disrespect. And now I know." She paused. The cursor blinked again, slower now, like it too was listening. "I came to lead transformation. But this was never a promotion. It was an infiltration. And while you debated my tone, I built strategy. While you laughed at my restraint, I built structure. While you ignored my presence, I claimed the foundation. You thought I'd leave with dignity. But I came to redefine it." Lucille saved the letter but didn't send it. Not yet. Timing, she'd learned, was everything. She printed 1 copy, sealed it in an envelope, and slid it into the bottom drawer of her desk beneath a framed photo of her late father, a former steelworker from Newark, who taught her that silence was sometimes the sharpest form of resistance. She had learned to weaponize stillness, not because she was weak, but because stillness lets you hear everything others try to hide. The next day, Lucille returned to work dressed in cobalt blue, not a loud color, but it refused to be ignored. She held her head high, smiled at no one. Harper avoided her in the hallway. Chandler passed her without a glance. That was fine. That meant they'd seen her strength, and now they feared her silence. By noon, she had scheduled a closed-door session with the board for the following Friday. The subject line of the meeting invite was clinical, strategic organizational realignment, chairwoman review. But the content would not be clinical. The content would be war. That week, she restructured the next month's calendar. Equity audit reports, leadership performance reviews, departmental listening sessions. With anonymous submission boxes attached, she authorized 3 promotions, one of which was for Amira, now moved into the lead for cross-functional strategy. No fanfare, just elevation. She left the door open that day. Let people see her typing. Let them wonder. In the quiet hours of the evening, she revised her letter. "To those who forgot I could lead. This will be the last time you forget me. I've already begun." She smiled as she wrote the last line. "And if you're wondering what's coming, it's me." She didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, she created a new folder. The rebuild. Inside, she saved the letter and the next phase of her plan. A full breakdown of how to restructure the culture, not with policies alone, but with accountability and memory, with people who had been overlooked, and now stood ready to rise. Lucille O'Neal wasn't leaving. She was about to become impossible to remove. By Wednesday morning, the air at Vantage Corp carried an electric charge. Not the productive kind that precedes innovation, but the tense, brittle kind that warned of structural shift. Employees whispered in corners. Department heads canceled lunch plans. Slack threads lit up with vague questions about the meeting. A closed-door board session was on the calendar, mandatory for executive leadership. Blocked out for 2 hours. No agenda posted. Harper Alden, Chandler Finch, and Delaney Grove met in Delaney's office, pretending not to panic. "She's up to something," Chandler said, pacing near the windows, running a manicured hand through his perfectly parted hair. First the performance audits, now this. A closed session? With her name on the invite? Delaney, usually calm to the point of smugness, didn't argue. She was still trying to recover from last week's departmental review, where Lucille had calmly, methodically dismantled their diversity dashboard by revealing it had been built using incomplete datasets and unverifiable metrics. They hadn't even realized she'd had access to the back end. "She's been playing chess," Delaney muttered. "And we've been playing whatever the opposite of that is." Harper leaned back, his jaw clenched. "I'm hearing from my guy in finance that there's a new investor about to take controlling interest. Maybe a compliance overhaul. A compliance chief." Chandler's laugh was brittle. "She probably brought someone in to clean house." They all went quiet. None of them wanted to say the next thought aloud, but it was real, looming, heavy. What if she wasn't just here to advise? What if Lucille O'Neal was the one they should have feared all along? The boardroom on the 32nd floor had never felt so small. Long oval table. 12 high-backed chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. A view most employees never got to see unless they were delivering coffee or replacing light bulbs. At 2:01 p.m., the door opened, and Lucille O'Neal walked in. But she didn't walk like she had in the past, with quiet purpose, eyes downcast, unnoticed. Today she moved with the grace of someone who had nothing left to prove, and everything already secured. She wore white. Not the off-white of caution, but bold, brilliant ivory. A blazer cut with elegance, gold trim at the collar, hair curled, framing her face like armor. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor in perfect rhythm. When she looked up, her eyes scanned the room, not searching, not pleading, calculating, grounded, watching. Harper stood halfway, then hesitated. Chandler blinked 3 times, unsure if protocol required a greeting. Delaney opened her mouth, but no sound came. Lucille placed a folder on the table, smoothed it with one hand, and took the seat at the head. She didn't speak right away. She let the silence sit. She let them feel it. Then, without theatrics, she said, "I was here the whole time, and I remember everything." The room didn't move. "I remember when I was called overly sensitive for flagging bias, when my reports were reworded and credited to junior staff, when I was asked to sit in on meetings I should have led, when I was told I needed to prove myself again and again, after decades of experience." She looked at each of them now. Harper, Chandler, Delaney, eyes full of perfect recall. "I also remember every time one of you smiled in my face and dismissed me behind my back. Every time you corrected my tone, instead of correcting your assumptions. Every time you thought I didn't see you rewriting the rules in real time, just to keep me off the board." A slow exhale, control. "You thought I was waiting for a promotion. I was waiting for the keys." She slid the folder toward the center. Inside were signatures, shareholder confirmations, finalized acquisition documents. As of last quarter, the Shaquille O'Neal Foundation has assumed majority ownership of Vantage Corp. As part of the restructuring plan approved by the foundation board, I have been named chairwoman, effective immediately.
No one breathed.
Lucille continued, her voice even. "For the past 2 years I have operated inside this company, at multiple levels, intentionally. I didn't just audit numbers. I watched culture. I witnessed how leadership was performative, how exclusion was systematized under the guise of professionalism, and I kept records." Chandler leaned forward, trying for charm. "Lucille." "No." That single word shut him down. "This isn't a debate. This isn't about whether you like me. This is about who's been doing the real work. While you polished optics, I documented patterns. While you practiced PR, I practiced patience. And while you tried to position yourselves for the next title," she leaned in slightly, "I positioned myself to rewrite the structure altogether." Delaney's voice cracked when she spoke. So, what happens now? Lucille smiled, small and sharp. What happens now is that the masks come off. For the next 30 minutes, she led a presentation, not a pitch, a declaration. She laid out the compliance breaches hidden behind department jargon, the unequal promotions mapped in painful precision, the hiring data that showed favoritism disguised as gut feeling. She showed them the faces of every overlooked employee who'd submitted anonymous stories through her independent feedback portal, which she had built under a neutral domain and never once tied to her name. I don't want revenge, she said. That's too small. I want a company that can look itself in the mirror. And right now, that mirror is cracked. She handed out new roles, effective immediately. Delaney was reassigned to a team restructuring research division, under someone she'd once called too green for leadership. Harper was placed on administrative leave, pending review of departmental conduct under his oversight. Chandler was given a performance-based probation, with direct mentorship under Lucille's new strategic equity officer, Amira. You don't have to accept, Lucille said coolly. But if you walk away knowing you weren't ready to change. No one walked. 4:00 p.m. The meeting ended. Lucille stood again, gathering her papers. She paused at the door and turned. One more thing. They looked up. I didn't do this because I was angry. I did it because someone needed to remember what leadership actually looks like. The kind that listens. The kind that serves. The kind that doesn't need to announce its power, because it's too busy building. And with that, she left. The boardroom sat in stunned silence for a full minute after she exited. Downstairs, the company buzzed. Word had already begun to spread. White and gold. Steel in her eyes. No one dared say what they were really thinking. But it passed from cubicle to cubicle like gospel. She had been here, watching, and she hadn't missed a thing. Later that evening, Lucille sat in her office, now on the executive floor. Same blinds, same view, same woman, but now no veil. She opened a folder on her desk. The rebuild phase 2. Inside, a roadmap. Culture reset. Equity-first recruitment. Leadership accountability protocols. An employee-led advisory board. Anonymous reporting channels. Real power redistribution. She typed a note to her team. You've been patient. Now we rise together. Tomorrow we start over, not by erasing what happened, but by owning it. She hit send. Then she looked out the window. Same skyline, but for the first time it looked different. Because now she wasn't looking at it from the sidelines. She was building something above it. The room was packed but silent. Not with fear. That kind of silence has a bitter edge. This was something else. Expectation. Tension stretched like a tight wire, waiting for Lucille to speak. This wasn't a boardroom now. This was a reckoning, orchestrated not with fire but with structure. No one knew exactly what to expect. Only that the air had shifted since the last time they'd gathered. People who'd once exchanged sly smiles behind Lucille's back now sat 2 inches straighter in their chairs. The screen lit up behind her. Vantage Corp Culture Restructure. Phase 1. Lucille stepped up to the front of the room. No podium, no cue cards. She didn't need them. Her voice, steady and unwavering, filled the space. Change doesn't come from vengeance. It comes from clarity. No preamble, no theatrics. Just that. She turned to the screen, revealing a slide titled Accountability Map. Names were not visible, but the color-coded roles and adjusted positions were obvious to those paying attention. Effective today, she began. Vantage Corp is no longer governed by legacy models that reward posturing and punish truth-telling. This is a company that will either reflect its values or confront its own irrelevance. There was no applause, only stillness. The kind of silence that settles in when people feel the weight of something permanent. Her tone didn't rise. Her face didn't harden. She delivered each word with that same careful control, a softness sharpened by certainty. Let's begin with structure. She clicked forward. 1. Equity audit systems. A full-scale review of departmental salaries, raises and advancement timelines. Disparities would be logged, anonymized and addressed within 90 days. Executive bonuses would be paused until all divisions reported full compliance. 2. Anonymous reporting channels. An encrypted system monitored by a third party, for all employees to safely report bias, harassment, or systemic barriers. Reports would be analyzed quarterly. Reforms would follow. 3. Cultural literacy and DI training. Not just a once-a-year slideshow. Deep workshop scenario labs, Live moderation. Not optional. A required part of job retention at every level. 4. Mentorship redesign. A new program assigning mid- and upper-level employees to mentor rising talent from historically excluded backgrounds. Outcomes would be tracked, not based on feelings, but on promotions, satisfaction, and team integration. And she said, pausing as the final slide appeared. Realignment of leadership roles, based on contribution, not comfort. That was when they shifted in their seats. They knew it was coming. They just hadn't expected it would be this calm. Let me be clear, she said. No one is being humiliated. That isn't my work. But there is accountability. She turned to Harper. His face froze before she even said his name. Harper Alden. Your department failed to close gaps in gender pay equity for 3 consecutive quarters. You ignored multiple internal flags. Effective immediately, you are reassigned to business continuity operations. You'll retain your salary, but your decision-making authority will be suspended pending performance reevaluation. She moved to the next file. Chandler Finch. Your oversight of culture assessments was incomplete and unreviewed for months. Despite data requests and warnings, you will remain on probation for 1 quarter, during which you will report to our new compliance and equity officer. Chandler nodded stiffly. He didn't speak. Delaney Grove. Delaney looked up. Not defiant, just tired. You'll be removed from executive steering and reassigned to lead a mentorship initiative focused on boarding and talent development. You'll be mentoring entry-level recruits, helping them avoid the same barriers you once helped reinforce. Delaney didn't respond. She just nodded. Slowly, Lucille let the slide fade. This is not punishment. This is recalibration. And then, more quietly, I could have made examples of you. I had the right. I had the material. But we don't build a new system by mimicking the broken one. Her eyes swept across the room. The staffers, the assistants, the overlooked, the underestimated. This isn't a clean sweep. It's a deep soil till. The old roots are tangled. We won't yank them out. We'll outgrow them. From the back of the room, a figure stepped in. Tall, suited, quiet. Shaquille O'Neal. No announcement. No wave. He stood at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, watching like a father watches a daughter walk across a graduation stage. She built herself. Lucille glanced toward him once. A flicker. A breath. Then she returned her focus. I know some of you don't understand how we got here. You're wondering when it became this serious. I'll tell you. She held up a worn file. The print was faded, but the title was unmistakable. January Wolves. I kept records, not to destroy, but to prove. To remind you that silence was never consent. It was strategy. Her voice dropped, softer now. There were nights I almost resigned. Days I thought maybe I was too sensitive, too tired, too much. But what I learned is people in power rely on you, questioning yourself just long enough for them to keep their seat. A pause. But I stopped asking for a seat. I built the damn table. She closed the file. I don't want your fear. I want your commitment. If you stay to build. If you go, go clean. No shame. No mess. But don't expect to come back unchanged. Her phone buzzed. She didn't check it. She let the silence stretch. Then, quietly, this is Vantage Corp now. After the meeting, the hallway swelled with low murmurs. A few heads turned toward Shaq, who remained in the back corner, nodding silently, eyes misted just slightly. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. Lucille stepped into her new office, not the flashiest on the floor, but redesigned to face the team area directly. Glass walls, no more ivory towers, no more hiding behind layers. Amira entered, holding a folder. Final draft of the mentorship structure. Lucille opened it, scanned quickly, smiled. Solid. Let's launch next week. Amira lingered. You could have fired them. Everyone expected it.
Lucille looked up.
I know. Why didn't you? She answered without hesitation. Because this isn't about watching people fall. It's about proving people can rise or be replaced if they don't. Amira nodded. Understood. That night, Lucille stood alone on the rooftop deck, looking out over the city skyline, wind in her hair, the weight of the day slowly lifting. Shaq joined her minutes later, hands in his pockets. You didn't just change the company, he said. You changed the way it remembers itself. Lucille didn't turn. She just breathed in the city lights and whispered, that's the only kind of change that lasts. Shaq smiled. I'm proud of you. Lucille finally looked over. I'm proud of me too. Down below, a new day began to unfold. And this time, the foundation wasn't cracked. The elevator doors opened with a smooth hush. Lucille stepped out slowly, her heels clicking with soft finality against the polished tile. But this wasn't the same floor it used to be. The walls were no longer stark gray. They were warm now, textured, subtle, lined with framed photographs of staff milestones and quotes etched in brass. The reception desk had been replaced with an open gallery of community programs, Vantage Corp, now funded. There was a glass case showcasing the company's shift toward equity initiatives, led by those who had once sat silently in the back of rooms. Above the entryway, a brushed gold plaque gleamed under recessed lighting. The O'Neal Legacy Wing, in honor of leadership that remembers what the world forgets. Lucille paused beneath it, her fingers brushing against the edge of her coat pocket, where a folded piece of paper sat, weathered, deliberate, waiting. This wasn't vanity. This wasn't about power. It was about presence. For so many years, she had passed through these floors as a shadow, as the one who took notes instead of credit, who was left off invitations, who had to smile and nod, and stay small, so others could feel big. Now these floors carried her name, but that wasn't the part that made her pause. It was the sight of a new face. At the far end of the hallway, a young woman barely in her 20s, maybe fresh out of grad school, stood in front of a bulletin board. She wore a soft rose blazer, sharp heels, and eyes full of that restless ambition Lucille recognized instantly. She was reading a framed quote, "Change doesn't come from vengeance. It comes from clarity." Lucille O'Neal. The young woman turned, startled to see her. Her eyes widened. Lucille gave a quiet nod. The woman straightened instinctively. "I'm sorry, are you Miss O'Neal?" Lucille smiled. "I still answer to Lucille." The young woman blinked. "I just wanted to say, I've read about the culture rebuild. I joined because of it. Because of you. It's..." She swallowed, voice breaking slightly. "It's the first time I've seen someone who looks like me lead a company that didn't just say equity, but actually moved like it believed in it." Lucille didn't speak right away. She let the weight of the moment settle. Then she placed a hand on the young woman's shoulder. "You belong here. Don't let the architecture convince you otherwise." The woman nodded, eyes glistening. Lucille walked on. She reached her new office. Not large, but open, layered with light and plants and portraits of her mother and father. There were bookshelves lined with works by Audre Lorde, James Baldwin, Maya Angelou, bell hooks. In the corner sat the first journal she'd ever written in, when the January Wolves folder was still just a notebook with a lock. She walked to her desk and pulled out the letter. The envelope was crisp now, handled carefully over the years. On the front, "For my son. Before the world tells you who you are." She sat, unfolded the letter, and began to read it aloud. No audience, just her voice and the echo of everything she'd survived. "Dear Shaquille, you were born tall. I had to grow tall. You grew into a body that made rooms adjust to you. I learned how to move in rooms that never looked my way. You had to learn how to soften your size. I had to learn how to sharpen my silence. And yet both of us have been underestimated for our shape, our shade, our sound." Her voice caught slightly there. But she didn't stop. "You became a giant because the world gave you a platform, and you never took it for granted. I became a foundation because no one offered me a platform, so I laid my own bricks. And then, one day you called me and said, 'I want to change the way companies treat people.' And I said yes, but only if I started at the bottom. Because how else could I tell you what it feels like to rise without them seeing you come?" She paused, her fingers gripping the edges of the paper now. "The world knows your name, son. It took me a long time to decide if I wanted it to know mine. But this wing isn't named for a woman who wanted recognition. It's named for a mother who wanted remembrance. For every black woman who gave companies their best years and got erased. For every voice that was too much. For every idea stolen, every smile faked, every email triple-checked so no one called her angry." Her voice dropped. "I'm not here because I won. I'm here because I endured. And now I've cleared the path so the next ones don't have to fight invisible battles before they even start working. This is not the end of a career. This is the legacy of one. With love, always, your mother." She folded the letter slowly, placed it back in the envelope, and sealed it shut. Then she opened her desk drawer and laid it gently inside. It sat beside her January Wolves file, now marked as archived. Do not destroy. Lucille stood, walked back to the window, and looked down on the city. The skyline glimmered, glass and steel stretching tall, but none of it felt higher than where she stood now. Behind her, there was a soft knock. It was Amira. "There's someone here to see you," she said with a smile. "A recruit," said she wanted to meet the woman who made this possible. Lucille turned, a warm grin playing on her lips. "Send her in."
Where?
As the camera pulled back, we saw the floor again. The O'Neal Legacy Wing. A space not just redesigned, but reimagined, living proof that change isn't just policy. It's personhood made visible. It's one woman's memory turned into movement. And through it walked a new generation. No longer asking if they belonged, but knowing they did. Oy remembered everything, and forgot nothing. 10. The legacy floor. And the letter to her son. Word count 1,1600 words. The elevator doors opened with a smooth hush. Lucille stepped out slowly, her heels clicking with soft finality against the polished tile. But this wasn't the same floor it used to be. The walls were no longer stark gray. They were warm now, textured, subtle, lined with framed photographs of staff milestones and quotes etched in brass. The reception desk had been replaced with an open gallery of community programs Vantage Corp now funded. There was a glass case showcasing the company's shift toward equity initiatives, led by those who had once sat silently in the back of rooms. Above the entryway, a brushed gold plaque gleamed under recessed lighting. The O'Neal Legacy Wing, in honor of leadership that remembers what the world forgets. Lucille paused beneath it, her fingers brushing against the edge of her coat pocket, where a folded piece of paper sat, weathered, deliberate, waiting. This wasn't vanity. This wasn't about power. It was about presence. For so many years, she had passed through these floors as a shadow, as the one who took notes instead of credit, who was left off invitations, who had to smile and nod and stay small so others could feel big. Now these floors carried her name, but that wasn't the part that made her pause. It was the sight of a new face. At the far end of the hallway, a young woman barely in her 20s, maybe fresh out of grad school, stood in front of a bulletin board. She wore a soft rose blazer, sharp heels, and eyes full of that restless ambition. Lucille recognized instantly. She was reading a framed quote. "Change doesn't come from vengeance. It comes from clarity." Lucille O'Neal. The young woman turned, startled to see her. Her eyes widened. Lucille gave a quiet nod. The woman straightened instinctively. "I'm sorry, are you Ms. O'Neal?" Lucille smiled. "I still answer to Lucille." The young woman blinked. "I just wanted to say, I've read about the culture rebuild. I joined because of it. Because of you." She swallowed, voice breaking slightly. "It's the first time I've seen someone who looks like me lead a company that didn't just say equity, but actually moved like it believed in it." Lucille didn't speak right away. She let the weight of the moment settle. Then she placed a hand on the young woman's shoulder. "You belong here. Don't let the architecture convince you otherwise." The woman nodded, eyes glistening. Lucille walked on. She reached her new office, not large, but open, layered with light and plants and portraits of her mother and father. There were bookshelves lined with works by Audre Lorde, James Baldwin, Maya Angelou, bell hooks. In the corner sat the first journal she'd ever written in, when the January Wolves folder was still just a notebook with a lock. She walked to her desk and pulled out the letter. The envelope was crisp now, handled carefully over the years. On the front, "For my son. Before the world tells you who you are." She sat, unfolded the letter, and began to read it aloud. No audience, just her voice and the echo of everything she'd survived. "Dear Shaquille, you were born tall. I had to grow tall. You grew into a body that made rooms adjust to you. I learned how to move in rooms that never looked my way. You had to learn how to soften your size. I had to learn how to sharpen my silence. And yet, both of us have been underestimated for our shape, our shade, our sound." Her voice caught slightly there, but she didn't stop. "You became a giant because the world gave you a platform, and you never took it for granted. I became a foundation because no one offered me a platform, so I laid my own bricks. And then, one day, you called me and said, 'I want to change the way companies treat people.' And I said yes, but only if I started at the bottom. Because how else could I tell you what it feels like to rise without them seeing you come?" She paused, her fingers gripping the edges of the paper now. "The world knows your name, son. It took me a long time to decide if I wanted it to know mine. But this wing isn't named for a woman who wanted recognition. It's named for a mother who wanted remembrance. For every black woman who gave companies their best years and got erased.
For every voice that was too much.
For every idea stolen, every smile faked, every email triple-checked, so no one called her angry. Her voice dropped. I'm not here because I won. I'm here because I endured. And now I've cleared the path so the next ones don't have to fight invisible battles before they even start working. This is not the end of a career. This is the legacy of one. With love, always. Your mother. She folded the letter slowly, placed it back in the envelope, and sealed it shut. Then she opened her desk drawer and laid it gently inside. It sat beside her January Wolves file, now marked as archived, do not destroy. Lucille stood, walked back to the window, and looked down on the city. The skyline glimmered, glass and steel stretching tall, but none of it felt higher than where she stood now. Behind her, there was a soft knock. It was Amira. There's someone here to see you, she said with a smile. A recruit, said she wanted to meet the woman who made this possible. Lucille turned, a warm grin playing on her lips. Send her in. As the camera pulled back, we saw the floor again, the O'Neal legacy wing. A space not just redesigned, but reimagined, living proof that change isn't just policy. It's personhood, made visible. It's one woman's memory, turned into movement. And through it walked a new generation, no longer asking if they belonged, but knowing they did. Not to remind you of the walls, but to show you the blueprint for breaking them. Because legacy isn't born from applause. It's written in silence, by those who refuse to disappear. Stay close. We're just getting started. The system doesn't see it coming. But you will.